Hi everyone, Heather here with astrologywithheather.com, and I am back with another special video. And today I have with me the one and only Robert Phoenix. Welcome back, Robert.
Good to be back, Heather.
Thank you so much for being here. And we're going to be covering today the winter astrology. So we're going to be looking at the mundane astrology and talking a little bit about how this is going to impact people more personally as well. Last month we went through and did a really big, really deep overview of the fall astrology, where we talked about some of the craziness going on in October and in November, which a lot of that it did actually pan out. It wasn't maybe the explosive energy that I might have thought that it was going to be, but definitely there was a lot going on around that time, especially when we were looking at that mid-October time period.
Yeah.
That's when like those lockdowns started to really roll out, especially in Europe and in the UK. And then we kind of followed suit, now like November, December and all of that. But do you want to do a little recap? Is there anything you want to say about what we talked about last time around before we get into this stuff?
Yeah, well, so the thing that really, I don't know if we talked about it, but the thing that really grabbed my attention was the Mercury station on election night. I mean, that was, and we're still dealing with that, right? It was just like everything just dropped. The bottom just dropped. They closed the polls. I mean, everything just stopped. And so if you want to look at an mundane astrological moment in time, it's right there. It's the Mercury station on election night, and we're still dealing with that. And to me that was the big takeaway. And look, I don't think it takes a rocket science. And by the way, I'm sure the disclaimer is already run here, but it doesn't. It doesn't take a rocket science to understand that we have witnessed one of the greatest election thefts of all time. Okay, now if it was not misdirection, or it was, if it was, the Republicans jacking up an election, I'd be saying the same thing. Okay, I am not a partisan person, and I've lived through elections that were clearly thrown, and I put up a huge stink about them. I'm pretty convinced that John Kerry beat George Bush. All right, nobody wanted George Bush in the second term. You go back and you look at what happened on the heels of that election, you'll see a lot of the same things. You'll see big irregularities with computerized voting. It was going on. And John Kerry was a skull and bones member along with George Bush. He was chosen to lose. Okay, he wasn't even very high on the Democratic hierarchy in terms of going into Iowa, and that's where he just somehow pops up and he becomes, the supposed candidate. And it was rife. I mean, rife with voter irregularities, and it's gone on in primaries. This is nothing new. Okay, nothing new. But what happened on November 3rd is something I've never witnessed before. I've never seen elections just stop in key states, and then all of a sudden there's a bunch of shenanigans. So this is kind of where we are now. And of course it's the true node in Gemini, and theoretically we have two presidents, right? We have one president who's theoretically a president-elect. We have another president who's pretty much not going anywhere. And we're in very interesting astrological times. And you and I talked about that Trump was going to win. It was in his chart, and any astrologer worth their salt would have seen that. But we knew that there was going to be complications, and especially with the Mercury station. It's like, what are they going to do here? Because this is such a slam dunk. The true node was transiting the sun. I mean, that's the moment, right? And here we are in sort of the postscript of that. It's still being worked out, and we're going to have some very interesting things to talk about with that December 14th chart.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, historically with Mercury stationing on election night, there has been a lot of, recounts and delays and a lot of sort of weird things going on. And definitely, I would say that that's the case this time around as well. I did not make an official prediction though about Donald Trump winning, so I don't know that you talked about that with me.
We talked about it together. I
I
think
think
we.
we talked about that privately, but
Okay.
one of the things though that I have been saying and that I was saying before the election was the only way that I could see Biden winning, and I'm putting this out there for the first time publicly, I guess, the only way I could see Biden winning is if Kamala Harris somehow becomes president, because her chart was really lit up. But if you're looking at just Trump versus Biden, yeah, that didn't make any sense to me, right? It really looked like Trump had the you know, had the
Oh, he had the hierarchy.
advantage. Yeah.
He had the cosmic hierarchy in his favor, and then you had Mercury retrograde going through Biden's 12th house and unearthing, all the dirt with Hunter. What's interesting is that this eclipse that just took place was on Joe Biden's Saturn, right? It was
Mhm.
on his Saturn, and it was on Kamala Harris's ascendant. And now the true node has moved into Kamala Harris's 12th house. So the energy for Kamala Harris, like she was peaking, prior to the election, and now that's disappearing energy. Like when the true node goes into the 12th house, it's submerged. And Biden's Saturn is in her 12th house. So we saw and what's interesting is that when the eclipse hit Biden's Saturn, theoretically he tripped over his dog and broke his ankle. You know the story now, right?
No, I'm not paying
Oh,
attention to a lot of these
oh,
things.
okay. Well, okay. So supposedly he's got this big German Shepherd, and now he's got like a broken foot. Okay, he's got a broken foot, and he's wearing a boot. Now there are people who believe that the boot is hiding an ankle bracelet. Like that's sort of the scuttlebutt that's going on. And whether that's true or not is whether it's true or not, I can't verify that. But the high strange of him somehow being tripped up by a German Shepherd and having a broken foot on the way to the White House is really weird. It's a really weird thing, right?
Yeah.
And now you can't even find Harris. Like she has not been visible. Like her Twitter feed is active, but that doesn't mean that she's active. So something astrologically has happened to that campaign, and a lot of it has to do with disappearing, and of course the age, whatever this Saturn piece for Biden is, which is in his seventh house partnership, like that's eclipsed now. There's something going on that's very unusual,
Mhm.
and we can get into the December 14th stuff because I think that's when it all gets fleshed out in ways that people may or may not be happy with.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, we can definitely start getting into that. Let me share my screen. That's the first step there. So I do have the December 14th eclipse pulled up. This is the whole sign chart. And obviously, I mean, the ascendant's going to change depending on what location we're in anyway. But this is the moment of the exact eclipse where it's occurring at 23 degrees in the sign of Sagittarius. It's in a conjunction for everyone out there with Mercury, which is the planet that rules communication and information, and also the South Node. South Node eclipses usually, to me, indicate a moving on from something more so than a beginning. Obviously, with a new moon and with a solar eclipse, there are going to be new beginnings had, right? That's a part of it. But the South Node is typically associated with letting go, wrapping things up, moving on. It's associated with the past rather than the future. But there are some karmic implications to that, and it's usually moving on from something or having to wrap something up or bringing something back from the past into the future to create something new. So that's kind of where I see what I see for this eclipse. And obviously there's a really nice trine here with Mars, which does give you a lot of momentum, ambition. There's like forward movement going on, but there's also this energy here. And this is where things get a little dicey. There's like a square still going on between Neptune and Mercury and this eclipse. And so that's where we get a lot of confusion and misinformation and weirdness floating around. And we've already been seeing that for several weeks now because Neptune's been squaring the nodes, right? And we just had an eclipse highlighting that. So just to kind of give people where we're at astrologically before we get into it.
No, that's good. And we've got the Mars square is going on. Mars is starting to really heat up here
Hmm.
and move into square with Pluto and Jupiter and Saturn. And I think that's going to be a really big story as we begin to close out the year.
Yeah, definitely. So, what do you think this is going to bring kind of more on a bigger scale? Because we were talking about the elections and the possibility of things maybe shifting or different information or weirdness coming out. I think that's still a potential. One of the low key kind of predictions I made on my Instagram was that potentially we could have one person who's elected president and then somebody else is going to end up being the president. And I made that prediction on like election day. I don't know. That's not like my most solid prediction. I was like, I'm not 100% sure about this, but this is a thing that potentially could happen. I'm wondering if you have any thoughts about that.
Yeah, possibly. I mean, this eclipse is going to be happening on Donald Trump's eclipsed moon, right?
Yeah.
He has an eclipsed moon in Sagittarius. So he's got an eclipsed sun on his eclipsed moon. And
Mhm.
of all the presidents in recent history, I would say that Trump has probably been the most star-crossed in terms of astrological phenomena happening over a 4-year period. I
Yeah.
mean, it's really kind of mind-blowing the things that have happened astrologically under his presidency, and even starting with when he got elected, which was in the final degrees of Saturn and Sagittarius. And what Saturn has done is it's opposed pretty much all of his personal planets along the way. So as a candidate or a person in general, he's been dealing with oppositional energy from the moment he set foot in the White House.
Oh, yeah.
So that's something that's really noteworthy. And I feel like, though, that this eclipse is also going to happen on the day the Electoral College meets. That's the 14th of December.
Oh,
So
interesting.
we're getting the Electoral College, we're getting the eclipse, and it's on Trump's moon. Okay, so how I've seen this, it's going to go one of two ways. Number one, it's either going to be the absolute and utter end and desolation of Donald Trump, desolation and desecration of Donald Trump, or the Electoral College votes him in, and that creates a whole other series of events that comes out of that. And I'm leaning into the second one.
Yeah.
I'm leaning into the Electoral College actually voting Trump in on this eclipse. And
Interesting.
there's a number of things I think that will happen around. They're already happening now in and around this time. So if people are paying attention, it's obviously not business as usual in the White House, because
Not business as usual anywhere.
no, no. So one of the things that's been happening is there's been a reorganization of like the Department of Defense. You got rid of this guy Esmer and brought in Christopher Miller, who is now the new head of the DoD. And Christopher Miller specializes in fourth and fifth generation cyber warfare and cyber intelligence. There's a reason this guy was brought in. Okay, so Trump also did something very significant in that he elevated special ops to be like the fifth branch of the military. So he now has like a unit that works with on an even level or an even playing field with the Army, the Navy, the Marines, the Air Force. Now there's special ops. So what he's done is he's created essentially an army that pretty much answers to him and Christopher Miller and Christopher, the guy beneath him, this guy Ezra Cohen Watnick, I believe that's his name.
Mhm.
So he also kicked Henry Kissinger off the War College, Madeleine Albright's off the war. So there, like a lot of really crazy things have been happening inside of the administration that are kind of undercover, and people aren't hearing about this because the media doesn't want to talk about anything but Biden and transition. And so there are things that are going on. And my sense is that on the eclipse, they will vote Donald Trump in as the president of the United States. Now, there's going to be other things that are going to kind of happen as a result of this.
Okay.
And I think we're probably very close to martial law in the country. And this is where we get into the Mars squares to Pluto and Jupiter and Saturn, because there are going to be a lot of people that are going to be happy over what I think will happen. And so I feel like, well, first of all, America as we know it is over. It's done. It's done. The United States of America as we know it is done. And it doesn't matter if Trump is president or Biden is president. Either one, we're going to have a different version of America, right? Biden will come in and basically will be, the Fuller Brush salesman for the Fourth Industrial Revolution and the Great Reset. If Trump comes in and retains the presidency, we'll have probably more of what would look like a monarchy in some ways. It'll be a very different kind of government. We've already decoupled. We have the states are doing various things that aren't in concert with the government. When Trump declared the national emergency on March 13th and on April 13th, basically FEMA took control and then the states took control, right? We're not even in the same country we were prior to March 13th. This is a whole different thing we're in now. And then after this eclipse and going into January 20th, it's going to be, again, another completely different version of this country. And a lot of people are going to have a very difficult time wrapping their heads around where this thing is going. Because remember, February, March of 2021, the United States has its Pluto return. And Pluto goes into Capricorn. And that's a huge, huge time for the Pluto cycle in the United States. And I know there's a big world out there, and I know a lot of people in other places are watching this, but we're all linked together now. And what happens here, I think, has a pretty significant impact on what happens in other places, especially as it relates to this, technocratic wet dream that Klaus Schwab and the Davos crew have in store for us.
All right. Well, that was that was some intense information. So kind of to follow up on that, one of the things that I was looking at in Trump's chart around this time period, and now that I know that that's around the time that the Electoral College is meeting to vote and all of that, so I'm kind of leaning toward the opposite end of what you just said, because this eclipse is happening on Donald Trump's moon, and it's a south node eclipse, and the moon is the ruler of his 12th house. And so the 12th house is the house of endings, right? It's the house of loss. It's the house of undoing. And so that makes me wonder, if it's actually going to go in the opposite direction of that, as opposed to, Trump being elected into office. I mean, what are your thoughts on that signification? Or maybe it's something going on in secret that we don't know about that brings him into office. I don't know, because it is also the house of things that happen in secret, right?
Yeah, I mean, it is the thing that, it does happen in secret. And, look at where Mars is. Mars is at 20 degrees. So, here it's going to be sextiling his sun, and it's going to be sextiling Uranus. And that's happening in the 8th house in his chart. And, again, that's hidden, that's tucked away. The other thing that, that we haven't really touched on, but I think there's a very good chance that we will be embroiled in a foreign conflict between now and the end of the year. And and if that happens, all bets are off, in terms of ushering in a new president. And again, this is just, chatter, but, good friend of mine, Masaki, knows people in San Diego, and they're saying that they're deploying right now to the Middle East. So, we're in a time of war and rumors of war, and we got this Mars square coming up here. Mm-hmm. And, if that happens, then, then everything that we're dealing with the election drama takes a backseat to whatever else happens. So, we're in a very interesting time. And, the thing with Trump is that I just get this sense that has very little to do with astrology. I just get this sense that he is not going to, in fact, he's not going to leave the White House. Like
he's pretty much made that clear so far.
He's not leaving, right? He's not leaving. And and I think that the Electoral College will vote him in. And if I'm wrong, hey, I'm wrong, and we live with the results. And frankly, I would much rather we didn't have any presidential drama at all. I'd
Yeah,
love our presidents
definitely.
to just be boring, and and not be a part of some scripted reality show. But it is where we are right now, and so we're going to find out. We're going to see. And normally with that eclipse, I would agree with you with your assessment. Like, I would totally agree with you. But there's something else going on here. Just like when the election night hit and he had that true node conjunction, it was like, well, shit, he's going to win. Like, this is the winning formula. And yet, right, we have that flat line of the Mercury station, all these places shut down. And, the next thing you know, the next morning, oh my God, we had all these votes in the middle of the night, right? So, in as much as it was predictable with Trump and not Harris, whose chart was it, by the way, as much as it was predictable for him to win and not win, now we have the eclipse, and the eclipse says, well, this is not going to happen. I mean, astrologically, what you brought to the table is sound, right? But we already saw what should have happened astrologically not happen. And, he's got that Sun-Uranus conjunction, and it's really hard to lasso that thing and get a handle on it, because it's always going to invert, or there's going to be chaos, and there's going to be some kind of different outcome. And even people who are like on the right, or conservatives or Republicans, they've had to deal with that, right? They've had expectations that he would do certain things, and they didn't happen. And people on the left would have to deal with the same thing, but with different issues. So it's not something that's always easily quantifiable or controllable, when you've got that Sun-Uranus conjunction. So we'll find out, but I don't think, whatever happens, whoever occupies the White House, this country will not be the same. It will not be the same. Period. End of story.
Yeah, I mean, I think that much is certain, especially looking at the inauguration day chart, which we'll get into in a little bit, and all of that. And it's kind of a wild card energy too, with that inauguration chart and the way that it's showing up with Mars conjunct Uranus, like on that day. That's like something really crazy and unexpected and shocking coming in all of a sudden, right? What are your thoughts on, because a lot of especially obviously the liberal astrologers, because everyone was predicting basically who they wanted to win was going to win. I mean, obviously I don't care. I mean, I obviously this matters like in a certain sense, but like I am not a Trump supporter. I don't like Biden. Whoever wins kind of sucks either way for me. But when I was looking at it, a lot of the more liberal astrologers were looking at Kamala Harris's chart as the kind of winning token. So they were basically comparing Kamala Harris's chart to Donald Trump's chart. And I thought that was so strange. I'm like, if this is a presidential election between Biden and Trump, you would look at Biden versus Trump, not Kamala Harris versus Trump. But it turns out, like, at least for now, in terms of what we, know from what's happened so far, that it seems like it's going to be Biden. So I'm wondering what your thoughts are on the potential. And what I was thinking is if Biden wins, it's because Kamala Harris will become president at some point. Do you have any like thoughts or speculation on that as a potential?
Well, this is for a person that had 1% of the vote during the Democratic primaries and was basically taken out to the woodshed by Tulsi Gabbard. I think that with the true node going into her 12th house, she's disappearing. Like, this is not the astrological moment of somebody who's going to become vice president or even president. She hasn't even resigned from her Senate seat yet. So there's a lot that's up in the air. She might be able to, work out something behind the scenes and, rule from a prison cell in Guantanamo. No, I'm just kidding. But when to me, it just doesn't, the astrology doesn't work. When that true node is going through the 12th house, it is a period where you are out of circulation. Like when I work with a client, and I'm sure you've done this as well, Heather, when I see that true node transiting somebody's 12th house, it's like, hey, it's not a time for you to really be in the world. It's a time for you to, create, do art, meditate, right? It's a time for you to gather your energy so that when the true node moves into the 11th house, you're going to be more social. There'll be a kind of a new version of you to mix with the world. So the 12th house transit of the true node is really important. It's like a chrysalis phase, but it has very little to do with being in the world. So if I saw that true node in her chart moving to the 9th house or the 10th house, I say slam dunk, right? Slam dunk. That's a great transit for her to do that. But that's not what I'm seeing. And that eclipse happened on her ascendant. This last eclipse we just had was on her ascendant. It was on Joe Biden's Saturn. Joe Biden's Saturn is in her 12th house. And so I don't think it's as much of a sure thing with her chart as it was, say, prior to the election. I don't see it. And again, I could be completely wrong because we're living in an artificially simulated environment, apparently. But if I was looking at it from that perspective, that's how I would see it, which means the South Node would be going through her 6th house. And we could be dealing with things like health issues, work-related issues, everyday things, right? That's the 6th house. She's not there. There's no emphasis there. So, I don't necessarily see it. And I do understand why they would run her chart against Trump's chart. I totally get that because, obviously that's who they would want in the White House. They would want somebody like Kamala Harris. It reminds me of when Obama was running for president and Sarah Palin was on the undercard with John McCain. That was really the election. It wasn't McCain versus Obama. It was really Sarah Palin versus Obama. And they were opposite signs, Palin Aquarius and Obama the Leo. And and at that time, I'm not sure if Palin really had, the quote unquote winning chart, maybe that theoretically Harris might have had. But it's not uncommon, especially in the modern era, to pit the vice president against the president, especially if the presidential candidate is very weak, like John McCain and Joe Biden were.
Okay, makes sense. Yeah, definitely. And even people who are liberals who are who voted for Biden, they're posting memes and stuff where it's like Kamala Harris pushing Biden off of a cliff and then she becomes president and things like that. So they don't even want Biden anyway. It's but that's not who you voted for, you guys. Biden's the one that's theoretically going to be the president. So anyway, I just thought that was kind of a strange thing. And I haven't really looked into it in the past, vice presidential charts, of vice presidents who become presidential, actual presidents, because they're the vice president and then the president can no longer be the president or he dies or is assassinated or whatever. But I think that would be an interesting rabbit hole to go down.
Well, Mike Pence is born on a new moon and he's a Gemini. Okay. So you have Trump, who's a Gemini with the Sag moon eclipsed. You have Pence, who's a Gemini with a new moon in Gemini. So they're both Geminis, but they have these opposite moons, which is unique in sort of a astrological sense. Pence's Pluto is on Trump's ascendant. And that's kind of interesting, right? His Pluto is on his ascendant, which means that theoretically there could be Plutonian issues along with, whatever goes on with Donald Trump. So, there's this weird, I think, what is it? Which show was that? It was a TV show where is it that Utopia series where it showed Mike Pence as president in 2025 or something like that, and had something to do, or it was 2022. It has something to do with the coronavirus. And this is before the coronavirus came out. It's really weird. Show? Well, I think it's from Utopia, if I'm not mistaken. Utopia. But there's a TV show where they talk about President Pence and the coronavirus, and it's the year 2022. I think it's Utopia, and it came out before the actual theoretical coronavirus hit. And so we've been dealing with a lot of predictive programming with reality. The latest, I don't know if you saw it or not, was from the Heidi Klum show. The America, the next, I don't know.
Next Runaway, Top Model.
Next Top Model, right? So in April of last year, again, pre-coronavirus, they actually had a contestant on the show named COVID. COVID. COVID Patel, or right, or COVID Patir, or something like that. Anyway, she comes out and she's wearing like these plaid pajamas with a plaid face mask on. I
No.
swear to God. I swear to God. And they say, COVID, could you please put the face mask on? And then one of the judges says, oh, that looks sick. Right? This is the Gemini reality that we're in, the true node in Gemini. We're seeing a lot of predictive program stuff. Right. This is how they've kind of, tell us, where things are going. They were telling us that COVID was coming through this TV. It happens all the time. So
but that one's like really weird.
Oh, it's very weird. But
especially like with wearing the mask. I mean, I've seen a lot of these things come up, but that's just.
Oh, and not only that, but they said put the mask on. Like she has the mask off of her face.
Why is that even part of the outfit? Like, what was anyway, that's.
Right. And then it's like, oh, that's sick. Like sick in a good way or sick in a sick, very strange.
Wow. Well, that's
very strange. So when we get into astrology now, like this whole Gemini thing, I think this is really kind of an important aspect to kind of wrap our heads around, because reality is like a hall of mirrors now.
Yeah. And especially right now with that energy with Neptune squaring the nodes, like it's become weirder and weirder and weirder.
Okay, so here we go. Neptune, Pisces, right? Pisces rules liquids. It rules oil, water, gas, alcohol, opium, heroin, vaccines. Right, here we go. We got Neptune and Pisces. What is it now? Second decan. So it's in the Cancerian decan, right? Right, Cancerian decan. Is it Cancerian or is it 20 degrees? We're in the Scorpio decan with Pisces.
It's at 18 right now. 18,
so it's right in the edge. It's right still in that Cancerian decan, which is, oh, you've got to do this, right? You've got to protect yourself. It's in that Cancerian kind of, be safe, right? It's the be safe decan.
Protect your family, protect your grandparents.
Right. Now, what are we doing? It's squaring all these Sagittarian planets.
And Sagittarius is a very self-righteous energy, so you're seeing that on all sides right now.
Absolutely. And again, we're in this revolutionary energy too.
Yeah, and that's really coming in at the start of next year. Like that's going to be intense.
Right, and this is the energy that was, present at the start of the American Revolution. Pluto at 26 degrees Capricorn, right? This is where we are now. We are really in the throes of a revolution. It's a revolution. We've been in a color revolution since 2016, and it has flirted with going kinetic. It flirted with going kinetic over the summer when we had the George Floyd events, and now we're headed again towards another phase here with these Mars squares coming up. So people don't understand this. People don't understand that we are in a revolutionary period. People think that we're going to go back to, whatever it was before March 13th. That ain't going to happen.
Or even like continuing with what's going on right now, because that's not going to happen either. Like there are definitely some changes coming up.
Oh, it's huge. It's huge. I mean, we're looking at right now, in LA, I don't know if you saw this today, but Eric Garcetti said that if you're out on the streets, literally walking around in the streets, okay, you will be fined and or imprisoned. This is in LA. Like, it has gotten that hardcore. They're basically telling people, stay in your homes, shut the doors, and don't come out. Unless, of course, you're homeless, in which case you're okay.
No, unless, of course, you're the mayor of any of these cities, because that is just getting ridiculous. That is such a Neptune squaring the nodes thing and like a Gemini thing. Like
Gemini, yes.
Like the mayor of Austin is like in Cabo on vacation saying, stay at home, lock yourself indoors, like while he's on the beach, like drinking margaritas or whatever. Like, what world are we living in? Like,
He's Steven Adler's an Aries, by the way.
Oh my gosh,
So
that was
he'll do whatever he wants.
well, all of them are doing whatever the hell they want, and they're literally throwing it in people's faces. They're telling you not to do something, and then immediately 10 minutes later, or even in the moment while they're telling you that, doing the exact opposite of what they're saying, because they are above the rules that they're setting. And that is like such a mind,
It's a total mind fuck,
yeah.
right? We are living in an open air industrial corporate experiment. This is where we are right now. We are basically Stanford prison experiment, Milgram. It's all here and it's all happening. They change the variables all the time. They want to see how people react, right? They move the goalposts. This is what's happening right now. And we are in a very we're in a pivotal period in not just like the history of the United States, the freaking planet. We are in a pivotal planetary phase right now. And people have no idea what's in store if we continue to allow these people to run this open air experiment, this industrial corporate open air experiment on us, because the future in that reality is not bright at all. It is the eternal dark winter that they keep talking about.
Well, all right.
I'm sorry. I mean, I feel very strongly about this because
you were right before too. It was like even more. I was trying to put a positive spin on our 2020 forecast last year, but it was darker than. I mean, I knew it was going to be intense, and I knew it wasn't going to be, love, light, and rainbows or whatever. But it was even more intense than what you had even predicted that it would be. And you were the one that was like, "This is going to be like pretty much a nightmare, right? This is not going to be great."
Yeah, and look, I'm very conscious of what I say, because there's a lot of responsibility with what a person says.
Yeah.
And especially when you use something like astrology. And I do my best not to be a fearmonger. Okay, I don't like dealing with fear. At the same time, we also have to understand the variables and the programs that have been set in place for what's about to take place. And when we deal with somebody, they're basically telling you, when Klaus Schwab says, we are going to use this experience to basically reset the entire planet, he is not lying. He is telling the truth. And they're going to use this opportunity to completely change this version of reality. And we don't have enough time to get into that. He's an Aries, by the way, Klaus Schwab. But this is where we're headed. And a lot of people are hoping that, once the Batman in Washington gets removed, we can be civil and have civil discourse again, and things will return mostly to normal. And the people that are being unrepresented or underrepresented will have a seat at the table, and that's all fine and good. Those are nice thoughts, but it is no longer about this country and what's happening. This is a global thing. Yeah. Look at what's happening in Australia. Look at what's happening in Canada. France was on fire on Saturday, right? I mean, huge.
And people aren't hearing about that.
No, it's on fire, right?
Weird. And there's protests going on all over in different countries in Europe against these lockdowns. I wouldn't know about that if I didn't have friends in these locations. Because we're not seeing that here in America in any, not just the mainstream news, but even it's really hard to get alternative information. It's really hard to get information through social media unless you're really connected to all these alternative outlets, or if you have people there, you don't know that these things are happening, that people are standing up for their rights, that people are pushing back against these lockdowns. And that's not to say, by the way, you guys, I'm not saying that the pandemic isn't real or that there isn't a virus. My husband is a nurse. He works in the hospital. I know that there's a disease process that's going on that's very specific. And you can think that you can understand that there is potentially a virus and also disagree with the way the government is handling it. So I just want to throw that out there before I get angry comments about that. But
you could give me all of Heather's angry comments, or
you can give Robert my angry comments.
I can take it.
I'm kind of done with them at this point.
I think you're absolutely right. I think there's a there with this thing. Okay, I
Mhm.
don't think it's not a thing,
I mean,
but
it is a thing.
it
There's
is a
people
thing.
that are
It is.
getting sick with a very specific pattern of illness, and it's
There is a
unusual.
thing. It is.
And
There is a thing.
but it's not the thing that we're being led to believe that it is, and it's not being handled in a way that I feel is appropriate, obviously. So
Right. No, I mean, you know, what do we have? It's got about a 97% recovery rate. Isn't that
it's like
right?
it's like 99 point something if you're young. And
Right. So we're going to
I mean,
shut down. We're going to shut down the planet for a 99% recovery rate, and then we're going to introduce a vaccine with a 95% efficacy.
well,
Oh,
and
that
we're
makes
going to
sense.
cause like worldwide starvation,
Exactly.
poverty, depression. You know what's really bad for your health that's really backed up by research? Social isolation. The biggest predictor of poor health outcomes in mental and physical illness is social connection. So if you're looking at supporting people's health, you want them to have that social connection. And if people have other illnesses, if people have dementia, you know what really makes their dementia worse? Social
Isolation.
isolation. And we're isolating all the elderly people. There's some, like, whatever is going on here, it's not helping like a lot of people, it's hurting a lot of people. So yeah, I mean, I definitely, I see why people are fighting back. I see why there are protests going on. And I honestly see like this energy here with this eclipse, there's a lot of momentum behind this, right? There's a lot of like standing up for what you believe, standing up for your ideology, standing up for your belief systems. There's an eclipse here in the sign of Sagittarius, which has to do with your integrity, your value systems, in a nice trine with Mars. I
That's
think
right.
this might mobilize some people, and I think that that's actually a really positive thing.
I think it's positive. I mean, we're starting to finally see people. You know, there was a period before the whole George Floyd thing where people were starting to kind of mobilize, like they were gathering outside of Gavin Newsom's, Sacramento, the capital in Sacramento. You would see people, honking their horn. I mean, there was something happening, right? And then the George Floyd bomb hits, and then everything changes, right? Everybody just gets pushed back inside again, and now that's kind of in the rear view mirror a little bit. And seasonally, we're in a very different time. Obviously, it's colder. People are probably wanting to stay inside more as a result of that. But here we go. Here's the Mars trine to the Sagittarian planets, and then the square to the Capricorn planets. Right? What does Capricorn represent? It represents hierarchies.
Mm-hmm.
It represents
Oppression,
governments. Yes.
tyranny,
Yes, absolutely. So what?
rules.
So where is the sizzle in this chart? Right, the sizzle is here from Mars to Sag, not here from Mars to Capricorn. This is the release point. The release point is in the passion. It's in the acceleration. It's in the catalyzation of these dormant factors in Sagittarius, and it's in serious conflict with this, what I would call the gross overreach of these Capricornian agents, which have just been bearing down on us, with Saturn and Pluto and Jupiter and that south node. We went through a Mars spell there. Like, this has been a very intense time for people to deal with.
Yeah, absolutely. And so let's kind of move on to the next big thing because we've been talking about this eclipse for a very long time. And so after this eclipse, very shortly after this eclipse, we have the winter solstice, and we have the great conjunction between Jupiter and Saturn, right? And this is like a big cosmic reset, ushering us into a new 20-year cycle, but also really a new 800-year cycle, because we're moving out of having these great conjunctions in the earth signs officially. This has been going on for 40 years now, where we've been transitioning out of the earth element and into the air element. But for the next 800 years, roughly, we're going to be having these great conjunctions in the air signs. And so this is happening at 0 degrees in the sign of Aquarius, which is very symbolic of something brand new. We're having a new 20-year cycle starting with this great conjunction, and we're having a new 800-year cycle starting really with this great conjunction. So whatever's happening right now around this time, and it's not just a one-time thing. It's not like the great conjunction happens on the 21st and it's just that day. This is something that is like far-reaching, that we've already been feeling and experiencing, that we're going to continue to experience and be we're going to figure out how this is going to play out over the course of especially the next year. And that's going to really set the tone for that big cycle, right?
Yep. Real quick, I mean, just one little follow up from the eclipse that I wanted to mention and get in before we move on is that in the wave spell, the Mayan wave spell that Jose Arguelles created, that day, December 14th, is 13 Ahau, and it is the final day of the Mayan calendar based on Arguelles' wave spell. So that's the end of that Mayan calendrical cycle for the previous 260 days. And 13 Ohau represents Christ consciousness, right? It is the phrase for 13 Ohau is, I endure in order to enlighten. Okay, I endure in order to enlighten. So one of the things that what I'd like people to take away from with whatever I was talking about is that there is the potential for something profound to happen during this time, right? There is something profound that has the potential to light up in each and every one of us, right? That is, I think, the underlying message here. And if there's magic in the air and magic afoot, it's the ability for each and every one of us to step into a new realization of consciousness, and that, I think, that really gets us into the 21st.
All right, good segue and uplifting information.
Absolutely.
I feel like we need to throw some of that in there.
Yeah.
But yeah, so moving on to the Great Conjunction. So the Great Conjunction, for those who are not aware, represents the beginning and ending of empires and dynasties. It's associated with the beginning and ending of big societal shifts and changes, right? Every time we have one of these, like, there's a major shift in kind of the big themes and the way that things are playing out in our society. And Robert, you have some really interesting insight into these great conjunctions here that I definitely want to get into.
Well, I mean, specifically with Saturn, this is the third Saturn cycle in Aquarius since 1962. Mm-hmm. And when we look at the inauguration chart, that's very similar to the February 6th chart of 1962, which is kind of commonly known as the Antichrist chart. But the Saturn cycles have been really interesting to watch and witness, right? So in 1962, we had John F. Kennedy, and Kennedy was, it was Camelot, right? And he was theoretically King Arthur. And the United States was poised to take the lead, in the 20th century. And there was an incredible amount of hope and promise, and people were feeling really good about their country, their president. It looked like there was a ton of prosperity. He's really the first TV president that, grabs people's attention. And then, of course, he's killed, right? He's killed in 1963. Saturn is still in Aquarius at that time. And what happens is we're going down one path with Kennedy, and then, of course, we have this trauma. And then we go off on another path with Johnson, and it's a very different presidency, and it's a very different reality that begins to emerge out of that presidency. So again, we looked like we were really beginning to sort of coalesce, and the American dream was the dream of Camelot, and it wasn't just an American dream. I mean, Kennedy was really embraced when he went to Germany and gave a speech in Germany. So this was kind of a global experience that was taking place, and then it all ends. And now we're off into the Vietnam War. We're into the war on poverty, the Great Society. MK Ultra starts to hit during the 60s. So we're off in a very different timeline. And then we kind of, get back on our feet again a little bit. The 80s roll around. And the 80s are an interesting time. We've got Farm Aid, we've got Live Aid, we have the harmonic convergence. The world is starting to kind of come together, through the advent of technology, satellite technology. Computers are starting to happen. And guess what? We've got another Saturn cycle coming up. Well, guess what happens during the Saturn cycle? The United States goes to war with Iraq, and it is the coalition of the willing, 1,000 points of light. Hello, New World Order. That was George Bush's speech, right? So now we have this another Saturn cycle, and this potential and opening gets shut down, and it's managed. It's stage managed. Like if you've ever watched that movie Dark City, it has that kind of Dark City feeling, where the scenery gets shifted around. Now here we are again. We had that Saturn cycle hit already, and we got moved into this dark global kind of Saturnian hypercube with the COVID thing. Saturn's already been in Aquarius, and you and I have talked about that. But now we have the wild card, and that's the Jupiter conjunction. To me, this is a game changer. This is the one period with these Saturn cycles, with this Jupiter conjunction, that I think there is a potential for a real opening in a way that these previous Saturn and Aquarius cycles did not allow. And I think, if there's anything that we can hang our hats on, it's this. And it's happening on the solstice, right? Which is very powerful. It's very, very powerful. And I was talking with a friend, and I was trying to get her to understand like the dynamics of a Saturn-Jupiter conjunction. And Saturn compresses, right? It compresses. That's what Saturn does. It brings things down, has gravity. And then Jupiter wants to expand. And so we have this compression and expansion happening simultaneously. So where do we see that, right? Where do we see compression and expansion happening at the same time? You will see it in an engine, right? So in an engine, you have cylinders, and the cylinders fill with gas and oil, and they expand. And the piston will come down into the camshaft and compress it. And what happens is we get an explosion, right? It's explosive. So when you drive a car, your car is really a series of mini explosions happening one right after the other. So this is the potential for an explosive time. But at the same time, it's the same kind of energy that allows us to move forward. It allows us to propel vis-a-vis, combustion inside of an engine. I think this is a really interesting energy. I think that while it could be a combustible time, it's also a time where I think we could have competing resets, competitive resets. That's what I think.
Okay, so by competitive resets, you mean there are different versions of the reset going on?
Yes.
Okay. I mean, I agree with you on that, because I think it's already starting, and I think it's kind of necessary unless you want to be in the version of the reset that's already kind of been set in motion. You need to be kind of on a divergent path. And I think there are a lot of people who are working toward that already.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I would agree, but it's that you're not going to see it on the evening news. They're not going to talk about it. They're going to talk about whatever version that they want to spin.
Yeah.
But there's a lot going on with people. I mean, we are very resilient, and I think people are they're really waking up. People are finally waking up, and hopefully the waking up part is also connected to like the responsibility and accountability that we have to play, the roles that we have to play. But I get a good vibe off this conjunction. I really do. And especially it being on the solstice, and all the planets are going to be visible. They're all on one side of the sun, right? So there's a very powerful alignment here. And to me, this is the beginning of the true Aquarian age right here.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people have been saying that. And I mean, I have a good feeling about this energy too. I do think it's going to be off to a rocky start, just because you can see already here that this conjunction is starting to square Uranus. And so it's going to be kind of like two steps forward, one step back, one step sideways, another step diagonally. And like people are going to be kind of shifting and having to pivot and change things all over the place. And I do think that the changes that come about this year are going to be gradual. It's not going to be like one big thing happens all at once. It's going to be like slow changes that are going to be built up throughout the year, just because there is that Saturnian energy, right? Uranus wants to change everything right now all of a sudden, and Jupiter kind of wants that too at the start of the year. But I don't think Saturn's going to allow that to happen. So it might seem like there's going to be a big dramatic change coming about on the global stage at the start of the year, but it's not going to have these, like, the big implications are going to be kind of like, a slow rollout, if that makes sense, what I'm saying.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like, you know, I feel like we have to figure out a way to really build bridges
Mm-hmm.
with people in a way that is really not forced or um, mandated upon us, right? We
Mm-hmm.
need to build bridges. We need to find alliances. We need to work with people that maybe we might have thought were, either competition or, we've got to change that model. We have, for me, I mean, at least for me, that's what I've been working on. Like I had David Palmer on my show 2 weeks ago, and it was a really great experience. And it was like, and I told him on the show, I said, when I first saw you, he was like, oh man, the Leo King, this guy's got an ego thing going on, whatever, right? But then I realized that this guy's a really hardworking astrologer. He busts his ass, and he's actually really, really good. And it's like, let's get him on my show. It's not about me or him. It's like, it feels like to me like we have to start pulling together and doing it in a way where nobody's forcing us to. These are decisions that we make, because if we're really going to step into something new, we've got to build those bridges. And I feel like this is really the beginning here.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, that's such an Aquarian energy, right?
Yeah,
Collaboration, coming together.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, well, so kind of on an individual level, that's something that people can think about. And we still do have that North Node and Gemini energy, which is about building community. I mean, there can be some interesting things that come about with that North Node energy. It's kind of like a wild card. It's a little insatiable. It's a little all over the place. But at the same time, that's what we're growing and what we're moving into. And we're forming communities in new ways with the North Node and Gemini. It's always, with the North Node, it's always something new that we've never done before, right? And so as a society, we've never had to build community in this way. And that's what we're doing right now. So combine that with the energy of the, great conjunction in Aquarius, which is about interpersonal connection. And I think you're absolutely spot on. That's what we're moving into.
And Aquarius is a sign that's associated with hope,
Yeah.
and and
And
and
looking to the future.
looking at the future and having a dream, right? And it's really terribly unfortunate that we have been initiated into a hopeless time, by people who essentially want to run a program and deprive people of their ability to earn a living, shut down their businesses, force them not to visit their parents who might be in a elder care facility. Tell people that they can't experience Thanksgiving. I mean, so we've been indoctrinated into a season of hopelessness. But yet, this is an augur and a beacon for hope in a lot of ways. And Saturn is the things that we work hard towards, right? So if you want a different future, if you want to have a dream or you want to have a vision, then Saturn says you got to commit to it wherever it is in your chart. So this is the accountability and responsibility that each individual has to build a bridge to a better world, and not put it off on the government or a president, whoever the president is. And
Yeah.
and I'm just trying to bring this into an individual level so people can grab onto something, and even in a very dark time, find something inside themselves that they want to expand or grow with. And even if it's a little bit at a day, right? A little bit at a day, use that Saturnian energy to do that, and don't give up the ship, right? This is, I think, a very powerful and very pivotal time for us. And if enough of us do it and walk into this time together, we can make it happen. That's the other thing that people don't understand. If we do it together, we have the intention, like we're incredibly powerful beings. And they've reduced us to, mask wearing puppets. I'm sorry. And this is the opportunity to liberate through that.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things that I talked about with Ksenia Moore, who I did a video with last week about the Great Conjunction, is the fact that when you're looking at Aquarius, it's not hierarchical. It's like grassroots, bottom up. It's for the people, right? It's the collective. And so I think we have a lot more opportunity as a collective to dictate what's going on here than we're being led to believe with this Aquarian
Absolutely.
energy.
Absolutely. I mean, look, you have a great following. You know, you've done a fantastic job. You know, really crafting a very solid career as an astrologer, teaching. You got a really solid community. You know, I've got, you know, a community that hangs out and does my shows. David's got his community. I mean, there are all these
Yeah.
communities that are online and they're vibrant, right? They're vibrant communities. They're kind of hanging out on, you know, in the virtual and the astral, but they're there, right? They're there in the ether, waiting to come into incarnation and manifestation. We've been working at this now for a couple of years. You know, it's not anything that's just all of a sudden, add water and stir, right? I see this as going to the next level. I see this as, the energy that we've been working on and creating together and independently of one another. This is the new wave, and I hope that we can, put this together in a physical sense as well. That's why I think it's really important. And again, this is me. This has nothing to do with Heather, but I think it's really important to be able to push back on insane restrictions. And I say insane restrictions because it limits us from being together in the physical space. And isolation, just like you said, is really unhealthy. Really
Yeah,
unhealthy.
exactly. I think that we need to take a good hard look at what we're doing and why, and question what we're being told, and question if this is what's good for us and what's good for our families. And maybe on some level it is, right? You don't want grandma to get COVID and end up in the hospital, but do you also want her to be isolated and at risk for all sorts of other things? You know, like, you have to weigh the pros and cons, and you have to think critically about this. And that this is also kind of, an Aquarian thing. It's about getting the information, right? Getting the facts. It's about scientific discovery. It's about doing your research. So I think that this is a time where people need to do their own research and think for themselves and figure this out kind of in their own lives and in their own ways. And I do think that the Great Conjunction supports that too.
So what do you think of that Mars exact square with Pluto? Look at that, 2323.
I mean, it's the last one, so we've had this already. This isn't like something, brand new.
But it's a culmination, and it's on this
It
great
is
eclipse.
information.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't love that energy. I think it's pretty volatile. I do like that there's a lot of really pleasant energy to kind of offset it, around this time period. But I think that there's going to be some power struggles. I think there's going to be some battles. I think there's going to be some very interesting dinner conversation at Christmas. I think things are going to get heated. I mean, that's what Pluto square Mars is. It's people losing their temper. It's people being excessively passionate and very, obsessed with pushing their way. And we're going to see that for sure.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Do you want to move on to January?
Sure.
Okay. Unless you have anything else to say about what's going on here. No? Okay.
No, I think we're good. Yeah.
So this is the chart that I really wanted to look at because just look at this. Like, this is January 20th of 2021. This also happens to be Inauguration Day here in the United States. I apologize. We are talking a lot about United States stuff. It's kind of what we end up doing because we live in the United States. And also we're in an election year, so it's kind of a thing. But this is the day that Mars conjuncts Uranus exact, and this is the chart for the exact Mars conjunction to Uranus. And not only is Mars conjunct Uranus, but the moon is in Taurus on that day, lighting that up. The sun just moved into Aquarius, lighting that up. We have Saturn and Jupiter squaring Uranus and Mars, very close to exact, lighting that up. Even Mercury's there. This is intense. This reminds me of what we saw at the beginning of 2020, where we had that really intense stellium in Capricorn, except instead of Mars being in the stellium, it's squaring it. And we also now have Uranus.
You know what phrase popped into my head when I looked at this? Lord of the Rings. I don't know why, but to me, this feels like Lord of the Rings energy. You've got that kind of, slightly druidic pagan energy with Taurus, right?
Okay.
And then you've got this, Aquarian sort of, quasi scientific occult energy with Aquarius here. And there's a conflict, right? There's a conflict between, this kind of, even though Uranus is there, right? This is like Earth energy. This is Earth. This is deep Earth energy. You got the new moon, Uranus, Mars, and then you've got this conflict going on with this Aquarian kind of, I don't know, hyper order in some ways. To me, this is a very conflict based chart, but
Mm-hmm.
it feels more like, something old
Mm-hmm.
in competition and in conflict with something new. And I don't know if the new is good or bad, or the old is good or bad here. There could be elements of both, but this is very interesting in terms of the spark and the friction between these kind of two very fixed like encampments. I just get Lord of the Rings. That's what this feels like to me.
Okay. That's an interesting association. I mean, I've never seen Lord of the Rings. I'm the only person on the planet who hasn't. So maybe I don't understand the reference quite as well as other people will.
Well, so Sauron, who is Saturn, right?
Mhm.
Sauron is the bad guy. And Sauron uses dark occult technology in order to create a synthetic army. Okay.
Mm.
That's what who Sauron is and what he does. They're called the orcs. And then you have
I
like
can see that.
the cats from the Cheshire or the Shire, right? The Shire.
Hmm.
And they're kind of mellow and kind of happy go lucky, but they're also, Viggo Mortensen with a sword and all this stuff. They're earthy. These are people, this is a group that is connected to the planet, right? Or the realm of or the realm. And so they're in conflict with sort of this dark occultic science that is represented by Sauron. You've got that Saturn Sun conjunction. So there's something here that I think is quite interesting in terms of that conflict. And I don't know. I think it's going to be. I don't know. I'm not even sure we're going to have an inauguration that day.
Right? Like this is really, really intense. And if we do have an inauguration this day, this is the inception chart for that presidency. So what is
Right.
that presidency going to look like? I mean, obviously a shit show based on what's going on right now, but this is intense. I think that there's going to be a lot of unexpected circumstances that come up throughout that presidency that are going to be just very shocking and very outside of the box. I think we're going to see things that we've never seen before, throughout the entire history of the United States come up over the next 4 years. If this is the inauguration chart, I mean, there's no way that we wouldn't.
Yeah, this is all happening in Trump's ninth house, by the way. He's got a ninth house. Taurus is in his ninth house. I think his midheaven is like 26 Taurus.
Yeah.
So that's all going to be ninth house for Biden, theoretically, right? That would be in his sixth house. All this would be in his sixth house. So I would
Interesting.
I would say ninth house trumps sixth house in some ways, right? Because you get into the ninth house, you get into law, you get into, sort of pomp, circumstance, ceremony. For Harris, she's a Gemini rising, right? So this would be
Similar to this. It would be in her
like
12th and in his
12th, 12th, yeah, exactly. So, I don't know. I mean, I think to me, this would be a very difficult day to have an inauguration. So
Yeah. I
so
feel
if,
like there's going to be like an uproar. Like there's just going to be a lot of chaos going on around this.
well, so if Trump does get elected by the Electoral College, this is what you're going to see on Inauguration Day. If Biden gets elected, I don't see a bunch of like, MAGA people going and tearing shit up. That they generally don't. That's not how they roll. Okay, that's generally not how they roll. So, if Biden was going to be elected or inaugurated during this day, this conflict would look very different. It would have a very different look and feel. I feel like this is an inauguration chart based on a Trump electoral college win.
See,
That's what it feels like
and
to me.
this chart is what made me think, especially that there could potentially be like some sort of flip or some sort of unexpected thing that comes up, and who we think is going to be inaugurated is not who's inaugurated, because this is like such a crazy energy that it doesn't make sense any other way to me. Like, what is this? Like, this is crazy. And also, around this time, I think we're going to see a lot of themes that we've already kind of been seeing around these energies. Like, without getting too far into it, like conflict around vaccination, right? We'll see conflict around probably economic stuff with the Uranus and Taurus being stimulated, conflict around issues pertaining to like the food supply.
Food supply, absolutely.
Censorship, especially. I think censorship is going to be
Censorship,
like,
absolutely.
it's already been horrible, but I think this is the moment where like censorship is just like it's over at this point. I think that this is where a lot of things are going to be shut down and a lot of people are going to be deplatformed. Like, everyone who wasn't the first two waves, this is it.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. And I mean, we could take it even one step further that, I think that the internet, it doesn't matter who's going to be president. The internet's going to be different too.
Yeah.
And if there's a Biden-Harris presidency, I will guarantee you that in order to have a website, you're going to need to have some kind of certification. Like, that is going to happen. If Trump maintains the presidency, there's a chance that he will revoke that Section 230. And that cuts two different ways. And we may have, more government intrusion or more kind of government oversight over the internet, but it might be different, right? So again, everything's going to change. Like, this will not be the same world that we were living in a year ago or even 6 months ago. We are in literally uncharted territory. But I think at the very least, with that Jupiter-Saturn conjunction, it's interesting, and there's more wild cards. And if people don't lose sight of the fact that, we could create a different reality, I think we can get through this very conflicted time. We're still going to have eclipses in Gemini and Sag going all the way through 2021. So we're not going to be through with that cycle. But yeah, it's kind of, may you live in interesting times, right?
Yeah, I'm very interested to see. I think whatever we expect to happen on Inauguration Day and whatever we expect to happen around this time, it's going to be way weirder than what we could even predict. Because this is a really intense chart and there's a lot of Uranian energy in it. So,
well, what do we have? Venus is what, trining Uranus, right?
kind of. I mean, it's a very wide trine. It's almost not a trine, but it's there. We do have a Venus, sextile to Neptune. Maybe that'll help some things out. This is mostly just a big giant square. That's mostly what this is. There's no way to get around that.
I think the Venus-Neptune sextile is a lot of drinking. That's what I think.
Yeah, doing things that feel pleasurable to kind of, dull the senses. Yeah, I could see that. Drinking, overeating, whatever your vice is. I think that's
and it's interesting too, because it's on the 20th, and we've been dealing with this 2020 energy, which has been like, judgment energy in the aeon. So this day is really in some ways the culmination of 2020, right? With that 20 energy. And this is the aeon. This is the end of one time, one age, and the beginning of another. And this puts us in about a 5. So we have 5 and 1, that's 6, and we got the 2. So this is an 8 day. This is a very powerful day. No matter what happens, this is an extremely powerful day. And whoever has the power rules this day. That I think we could probably agree upon. Whoever has the power, and however you define that power at that time.
And this energy is so strong, it's not going to be just this day. We're going to be feeling this the entire month of January and even into February, which we'll get into in a second. So just know that what we're talking about right now, it's not only for the 20th of January, for all of you out there in YouTube land. This is something we're going to be dealing with pretty much for the entire, it's like a month-long chaos energy in January. And so just kind of like plan lightly, right? I always tell people when the astrology gets heavy like this, especially if you're somebody who has a lot of fixed energy in your chart. So, you know, sun, moon, rising planets in the fixed signs, which are Taurus, Aquarius, Scorpio, and Leo, you want to plan lightly because you're going to have some wild card energy in your own life. And so on a personal level, you don't want to stack the cards too high because there's going to be a lot of shifting going on and a lot of unexpected energy. So you don't want to burn out. But okay, so far we have, right, December. And so December, we're ushered into this like new paradigm. Things seem like they're going to be moving in a good direction. And then we shift into January and things get like crunchy and intense and weird. And then what happens, right?
Yeah, then what happens? I think we all take mushrooms and
we all tap into this Neptune energy, and
we take mushrooms and get beamed up to the mothership. That's what happens.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you want to move on to February?
Sure.
Okay, so in February, a lot of the same energy.
It's Groundhog Day.
Yeah, so it's kind of like we're still dealing with the ramifications of January, and things are continuing to play out and intensify. So this is February 17th. So this is like almost an entire month after that chart that we just showed, which is a chart that's really showing what's happening the entire month of January. So it's not just for that time. So we have this 2-month period here where it's like, it feels to me like people are going to be like wanting to rebel, wanting to break out, wanting to change things. They're not going to be able to take it anymore, but we're still under this Saturnian energy, and we're trying to figure out how to be free and how to do the things that we want to do, right? Because I think that's a part of this energy too. It's like people reach their boiling point with this Mars conjunction to Uranus, and they're just like, I can't take it anymore. I need to change something. I need freedom. I need something different. And Saturn's like, well, no, rules.
It's the dead of winter too.
Yeah, that's going to drive people even more, like crazy here.
Yeah, cold cabin fever. Mars, when we looked at the last chart, Mars was at 0 Taurus, right? And here it's at I'm sorry, 6. The moon was at 0. And now it's at 21. So it was still ahead. Was it conjunct Uranus during that time? Is that right?
So this is the day it conjuncts Uranus exact, is on January 20th. And this is the day that Uranus squares Saturn exact. And the moon is there again in
That's
Taurus.
right. The moon is, that's right. Yeah. So Mars is separated here.
Yeah.
And
but it's squaring now Venus and the sun.
And Mars and Taurus it's a slow Mars. Mm-hmm. Right. I mean, it is not like, the dashing and daring Mars and Aries, or the kinetic and all over the place Mars and Gemini, right? It is a slow Mars. It's kind of like, but once it gets momentum, then it's like a bull, then it's really, and it's hard to stop. Once Mars and Taurus gets momentum, it's very hard to stop. So here it's like way out in front. And to me, it's picked up momentum from that the last chart, and whatever is started on that inauguration day, I think it's going to be really hard to put it back in the box with Mars and Taurus because of how Mars operates in Taurus. It's slow at the beginning, but it's like a rhino once it gets going. And it's kind of the lead dog here in some ways with this chart. And it feels to me like an echo of what you've been talking about. People have had enough. We've had enough, and they're trying to figure out how to push back against all of this. And I just keep coming back to this Lord of the Rings thing. And you've got Klaus Schwab, who's like the new Sauron of Davos, and, the fourth industrial revolution, and, people are going to get jacked into the internet. I mean, that's really That's his goal, man. He wants people jacked into the freaking internet because they want to put communication devices in our heads, and I mean that's his wet dream. But you have humans over here. Like, to me, this is radically human, and there to me, this is the pushback. This is the no. We're not going to do this. We're not going to do this. We're not going to. Get locked up or wear masks, or we're not going to take your vaccine. This is the conflict right here. I think this is what we're seeing.
And like, I keep getting the sense, because like this first chart, right, we have Mars, which is like initiation and setting something in motion. And that's
Right.
really the big player. And so in January, I feel like something's being set in motion, like something really strange and really intense. And then in February, it's being locked in, right? That's that Saturn square to Uranus. And then Mercury's retrograde. So it's causing people to have to go back and rethink things, to re-strategize and like rethink their plans because of whatever it is that's going on here. And I think that it's not going to just be like the normal stuff that we've already been dealing with too, like not just censorship or, there's a vaccine and now you can't travel unless you have it, or whatever it is that they're going to do. I think that this is something that we haven't seen yet that's going to still be the result of what we just went through, but it's something new. Like,
That's a really good insight, and I would totally agree with that. Because let's just pile more on to the to the human experience at this time, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. The trine with Pluto with Mars is very powerful, by the way. Like,
and that's going to be happening at the end of February, and that's where things start to kind of like open up. Like end of February and into March, things actually start to look a lot nicer and a lot calmer. It's kind of like, okay, we just dealt with that. So now there's all this Piscean energy coming in in March, and we have like a new moon conjunct Neptune. And it's just like, oh, let's just, disconnect for a little bit. That was too much.
I mean, for me, it's like that Mars-Pluto trine, like what's worth fighting for?
Yeah.
What's worth fighting for? What core values do you really want to lay your life on the line in a lot of ways? Because Pluto's about life and death, right? But it's more positive. It's more life oriented than death oriented. But whenever you bring Pluto into the conversation, you kind of have to look at that in some ways. It's very intense, and there's not a lot of gray area here. And Pluto, of course, is in that cardinal phase, and Mars is in a fixed phase. So it's initiatory, but it's initiatory that lasts, right? This is not something that ends overnight. This is a big deal. Like these two charts that we just looked at, January 20th and February 17th, these are very, in my estimation, very important charts for a very important time in the human story.
Yeah, I agree. Absolutely. And I do like that Mars Pluto energy, because I mean, that's like super laser focused will. And that's like being very determined and doing something that's going to be very stable, very long lasting in the earth signs, and really sticking to it. So this is kind of like a, like a really determined energy, right? And so it's like whatever it is that's coming up right now, we're determined to do something about it, to overcome it, to make some sort of change, to push forward with something in our own lives, at least with that Mars-Pluto energy. So I think that is a nice, that's where this chart is starting to open up versus the chart before in January.
Yeah. No, this has some resolve to it, right?
Yeah.
The Mars-Pluto trine is resolved. What I flash back on is China. China's ascendant, I think, is either 1 or 2 Aquarius. So this Saturn-Jupiter conjunction is going to be right in China's ascendant. That's going to be really interesting to deal with China and this new thing that's coming, into awareness around, their government, their economy, and them as an entity, right? So are
And
they
maybe
good?
exposing some of the things that they're doing, right? Because they're like funding a dictatorship in North Korea that is committing genocide. I mean, there's concentration camps there. Nobody's talking about that. So maybe this is the fall of the Chinese empire. I mean, the Great Conjunction is associated with the rise and fall of empires.
That's
Or it's
right.
maybe them getting even bigger. Hopefully not, but you know.
Well, I mean, this is where we're at, right? We're going to figure out. We're going to see, where this compression and expansion is going to hit. And because it's in Aquarius and ruled by Uranus, it's a little less predictable than
Yeah.
if it was like the Jupiter Saturn conjunction, right? It's less predictable than that. Jupiter Saturn Capricorn, you could basically write the script on that.
Yeah.
You know what's going to happen. You're going to have big overreach with corporations and governments and hierarchies. They're going to want to, put new rules into place. This
Mm.
is different. This is different. It's like spin the wheel. Let's go. Let's see where this thing lands.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, okay. Is there anything else that you want to say about what's going on in the winter before we move on?
No, I think we've said plenty. I think it's pretty simple,
Yeah.
but at the same time, it's very intense and dense and working through some deep conflicts. But in order to get to a different place, we're going to have to do it anyway, right? We're going to have to work through a lot of shit anyway. So that's the way it is.
Yeah. It's going to be an interesting time this winter. I think winter is going to set the tone for a lot of what's coming up for the remainder of the year and really for the next 20 years. So I think we need to really keep an eye on what's going on out there.
One of the things that I've been sharing with people is that Mars is going to be going through all the personal signs in 2021. And it finally gets into Libra in November and actually ducks behind the sun in November. So Mars will be visible in the sky for the entire year. And it's going to be going through all those personal signs. So it's a time for us as people to deal with Mars energy in those very fundamental places in our chart, where we line up from Aries to Virgo roughly and part of Libra. And then because in 2022, Mars goes into the outer signs and we'll be dealing with Scorpio and Sagittarius. So this is really a time for theoretically the people, right? It's in those fundamental below the horizon signs. So this is a really good time to use Mars energy to ground yourself in those areas of your chart and try to gain some strength and gain some momentum, because when this thing takes off and goes into the outer signs, you're going to need to be prepared and have gone through some good Mars training during this time.
Yeah. All right. So everybody use your Mars. Get some exercise, exercise your will.
Yeah, absolutely.
Good martial energy. Cool. Well, thank you so much, Robert, for being here and for doing another forecast. We'll be back for the spring forecast. And if you guys are a member of my cosmic community, Robert and I are going to be doing a very special video. We're going to record it next week, so it'll be up on that page very soon. And you can find the link to sign up down in the description below. And if you want to find Robert and book a reading with him, I'm going to post his link down in the description below. And I highly recommend that you subscribe to his channel. He does really awesome content, not just astrology content, but also, all sorts of interesting stuff and social commentary. So you can also find that down in the description below. Thank you so much, Robert, for being here.
Thank you, Heather.
Bye.